had a bit of nostalgia roll over me tonight as I thought about Sunday nights. Do you realize that there's probably less than a handful of churches in the whole Seattle area that are holding Sunday night services? Isn't that sad? Doesn't that sadden you? I think about how many churches there are across our country, in our city, that sit vacant until 1 hour a week. Millions and millions of dollars worth of property that sit there and are used one time for an hour on Sunday morning. And pastor may come in and use his office and that side. But that's kind of sad, isn't it? Seems to me like. We were talking, Al and I, and Larry, would you introduce me to your wife? No. June. We're talking before the service and just talking about things, you know, and you get to thinking about, most of us are getting into our senior years, if not well into them, like Jay is, but the only thing that saved Jay through the years, Kathy, is you. So you deserve a lot of credit. Yeah, but I think about, you think about in your own life, how many changes have you seen? Gosh, I mean, don't you feel, I feel like a dinosaur. And my grandchildren make me very much aware of the fact that I am a dinosaur. They call me a dinosaur sometimes about things. And I thought about that, and I thought, you know, that is such a picture of mankind. In Numbers, if you'll turn there with me tonight, in chapter 16, is one of the episodes in the children of Israel's life that I think mirrors much of what happens in our own as well. If I had been Moses, I probably would have quit at least 500 times before this. You talk about being a leader that has been criticized, chastised, rebelled against, confronted over and over again for his leadership. Moses. He was called a meek man. And yet he had one of the most challenging jobs, and we're studying that in Sunday school, by the way, and we'll be looking at it for several weeks. But to lead a people out of Egypt and into the promised land as God had promised them was a tremendous, tremendous task. And he had to depend upon God's power. And God's power had showed himself. You know, if I was following a guy and I watched him as an army come up on us and we all scattered across the sea, and I watched him when we get to the other side and he goes like this and the sea rolls back and kills that whole army. You know what I would do? I'd say yes sir and no sir the rest of my life. Just knowing that the power of God resided in that individual. And yet constantly, and here in this passage today, some of the people come to question Moses' leadership. Now, there's a balance here, and I hope you understand that. There's a balance between following leadership, because leadership demonstrates its ability to do the job right, demonstrates a competence, demonstrates a real knowledge and understanding of what the problems are, and they're leading in that. If you have a boss at work, I won't take a poll, but I wonder how many of them are worth anything. You know, if you've ever had a good boss, then you recognize how lousy the bad ones are. But Moses was competent and showed God's power, and yet constantly they seem to want to rebel against that. Understand, what is leadership in a church like? Leadership in church is not like the world system, number one. Deacons, we had two of them back here. Are we supposed to go and bow in their presence and kiss their toes? Well, that's what Joe told me. Joe wouldn't lie. Oh, kiss the ring. Joe's got the ring. You know? Pastors. Are pastors always 100% right? None that I ever met. You know, the church over on the other side of the sea has a doctrine that the leader can speak ex cathedra. Do you know what that is? What is that? Carl, tell us. Everything he says is true. It's spoken from God and it can't be changed. So they speak ex cathedra. Well, pastors certainly don't speak ex cathedra, do they? And you and I know that leadership across our country is probably at its weakest point that it's ever been because of lack of men of God to lead and to preach the word. We're talking about that tonight. Good gracious, some of the lukewarm, pansy-mamsy stuff that's passed off for sermons makes you want to puke. You remember when men of God stood up and said, "Thus saith the Lord." This is what God says. You know, folks, it's not a popularity contest. Your walk with God. It's not I'm going to be good today. Tomorrow I'm going to do what I want. It's a different thing. Leadership. Leadership is given to you because God chooses to do so. Leadership is leadership, and you need to follow leadership as long as that leadership demonstrates God's power and grace is evident in their leadership. I was told one time, "Oh, you mean you're not going to vote for this?" "No, I'm not going to vote for that." "Well, but the pastor said we should." And they spoke it as if it came from the councils of heaven. And I said, "No, I'm sorry, but I disagree. I think he's wrong." Well, leadership comes from you following. We have used the illustration before of cowboys and shepherds. The world's idea of leadership is based on the cowboy method. And what was the cowboy method? The cowboys climb up on their horse and they get their whip or their rope and they drive the cattle, right? Go out here and one gets it straight, he runs over here and chases him back, and they use force. And if you'll notice on a cattle drive, the cowboys are surrounding the cattle and they're all moving forward, right? That's a cattle drive. That's cowboy method. What was the shepherd's method? The shepherd's method was that the shepherd loved his sheep and show competence in leading the sheep. So when you see a group of sheep going off to the pasture, it's with a shepherd in front and they're following. And there's nobody driving them. They're following because they learn to respect him. Well, that's the kind of leadership that's expected in the church today, and the kind of leadership we should want. Now, here in the 16th chapter of Numbers, we read about a group of people who were already involved in ministry in Israel, but rebelled against Moses and Aaron and came to them wanting more. 16 and verse 1. Now Korah, the son of Izhar, the son of Kothan, the son of Levi, and Dathan, and Abiram, the sons of Elab, and on the sons of Peleth, sons of Reuben, took men. Did I impress you? I guessed on every one of them. But it sounded good, right? And they rose up before Moses with certain of the children of Israel, 250 princes of the assembly, famous in the congregation, men of renown. And they gathered themselves together against Moses and against Aaron, and said unto them, Ye take too much upon you, seeing all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Wherefore then lift up yourselves above the congregation of the Lord. And when Moses heard it, he fell upon his face. And he spake unto Korah and unto all his company, saying, Even tomorrow the Lord will show you who are his, and who is holy, and will cause him to come near unto him, even him whom he hath chosen will he cause come near unto him. And then Moses gives them a commandment about censers. Now what's happening here? Korah and his buddies, and there's an impressive number of them, and there's even some estimates here that a great deal of the congregation of Israel supported Korah. They were Levites, which means they ministered around the tabernacle and the different things that they were assigned to do. But they come to Moses and to Aaron, and what they're demanding is that they be allowed to be in the priesthood. They wanted Aaron's job. They wanted Moses' job. Why? Why would you think that they would want those? Anybody got an idea? Power. Power is a, what's that word? Aphrodisiac? Is that it? They wanted more. Now, stop and think where these folks are at. Who were they rebelling against? Actually, they're rebelling against God. They don't like the way God's doing things through Moses and Aaron. And so they're going to go and complain. What are they going to ask for? That they be given a chance to do that. They're going to want to be priests and leaders. Now, I think of some of the things that were said on down in the chapter. We won't read it all for time's sake, but notice some of the statements that they made. The congregation was holy. What do they mean by that? Have any ideas? You can converse with me tonight. I'm in a conversing mood. You'll know when I'm not interested in being interrupted. What does it mean to say the congregation is holy when Korah says that to Moses? Huh? Perfect, holy, righteous, walking with God. Is that true? Not really, is it? Part of the thing here, folks, is that these folks become dissatisfied. You know why they became dissatisfied? Look in verse, let me find those two verses. I think it's 27. I missed that thing. I write down notes and then I can't read my notes. Oh, I'm sorry, verse 12. And Moses sent to call Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Elab, which said, We will not come up. They was calling them to a public meeting. They refused to come. Is it a small thing that thou hast brought us up out of a land that floweth with milk and honey, to kill us in the wilderness, except thou make thyself altogether a prince over us? They're accusing Moses of these things. Moreover, thou hast not brought us into a land that floweth with milk and honey, or given us inheritance in fields and vineyards. Wilt thou put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up. What is the basis here, folks? The basis of a lot of this discontent is what has happened. When they left Egypt, what was the gleam in their eye and the goal of the future? Where were they going? Promised land. Why would you want to go to the promised land? Milk and honey. What's milk and honey? Good stuff. Good stuff. You want the goodies. You want to have the good things to eat. You want to have good things for your family. You want to be prosperous. You want to have the land produced for you. This promised land was projected as a land flowing with milk and honey. They talked about grapes that they had to carry on staffs. They were so big, the what do they call them, bunches type of thing that came out of the land. And so when they left Egypt, this goal of going into the